Welcome. First, I just want to say welcome to all of our guests that are in the audience today. Thank you for making time to come to a board meeting. I will call the meeting to order. Tonight, we are using closed captioning on the YouTube live stream. For those speaking during the meeting, please speak clearly so the closed captions are as accurate as possible. So would everyone in the boardroom please stand if you're able and join us in saying the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Juro fidelidad a la bandera de los Estados Unidos de América y a la república que representa una nación bajo Dios, indivisible, con libertad y justicia para todos. Thank you. Now I'd like to ask for a moment of silence for just, for our communities and for our children and for our country and for just the world as a whole, for people that have lost their lives and give their lives. And so please join me. Ms. King, may I have a roll call, please?
Peggy Mueller-Aragon.
Here.
Danielle Gonzalez.
Here.
Barbara Peterson.
Here.
Crystal Tapia Romero.
Here.
Josefina Dominguez.
Here.
Courtney Jackson.
Here.
Yolanda Montoya Cordova.
Here. Community members may attend the APS Board of Education meetings in person at the Alice and Bruce King Educational Complex here at 6400 Uptown Boulevard Northeast, or watch the live stream on the APS Board of Education YouTube channel. So our first item for action is the adoption of the June. Before I do this, though, I want to let the board members know that there were two typos that were fixed on page 4 of the May 3, 2023 draft minutes, and I'll ask you to consider approving those minutes with the changes. So adoption of the June 7th, 2023 Board of Education meeting agenda and approval of the July 18th, 2022 Capital Outlay Property and Technology Committee meeting minutes and the May 3rd, 2023 Board of Education meeting minutes. May I have a motion, please?
I will move for adoption of the June 7th Board of Education meeting agenda and approval of the July 18th Capital Outlay Property and Technology Committee meeting minutes and the May 3rd Board of Education meeting minutes with the removal of from the consent of item 5A4.
Okay. I have a second.
I'll second.
Have a roll call, please.
Peggy Mueller-Aragon.
Yes.
Danielle Gonzalez.
Yes.
Barbara Peterson.
Yes.
Crystal Tapia Romero.
Yes.
Josefina Dominguez.
Yes, and I seconded that. Just for the record.
Thank you. Courtney Jackson.
Yes.
Yolanda Montoya Cordova.
Yes. So our next item is public forum, and Secretary Jackson, will you please share the instructions and lead us in public forum tonight?
Okay, welcome to our public forum guests. When you signed up to speak, you were asked to review the rules and expectations which our presiding officer will enforce. The New Mexico Open Meetings Act requires that our agenda specify in advance the items that will be discussed and voted on during the meeting. Therefore, public forum is not a dialogue among speakers and board members, but rather a chance for us to hear from our community. We will call participants to speak in the order they signed up, whether in person or virtual. Those here with us tonight will be asked to come to the microphone in the center aisle at the back of the room when your name is called. Online guests will stay in a virtual waiting room until it is their turn to speak. When it is your time, you will be escorted into the main meeting space. Please turn on your audio and video. Once your speaking time is up, you will be ushered back into the waiting room. When you are finished speaking, you may choose to leave the meeting and watch it on live stream. We have set aside 45 minutes for public forum. Because there are fewer than 22 speakers tonight, Each speaker will have 2 minutes to address the board. Please be concise and try not to repeat what others have said. Tonight, there are 21 speakers. Once your time is up, you will be directed to complete your sentence quickly so that others can speak. You may not yield your unused time to another speaker. If we don't get to everyone or you feel unable to convey your message, you may email boarded@aps.edu. In addition, for those of you who are here tonight, a representative from our service center is here to assist you. And she's waving her hand right there. Yeah, thank you. I was looking for you. So at this time, Mr. Gonzalez, will you please introduce our speakers?
Thank you, Board Member Jackson. Our first speaker tonight is in person, and it's Julia Himes. You'll have 2 minutes once you begin speaking. Thank you.
My name is Julia Himes, and my daughter goes to Bandelier Elementary. I'm here to talk about the proposed bell schedule changes. The same sleep research used to make start time changes for middle and high schools also stated that children between the ages of 6 and 12 need between 9 and 12 hours of sleep each night. Bandelier's proposed 7:30 a.m. start means that some of our children will need to go to bed at 6 p.m. while it is still light outside. I connected with the school community and made a petition listing our concerns, and it was signed by over 200 families. The 7:30 start time for next year is detrimental also for our children's safety while getting to school. Many students will be crossing busy streets like Girard and Carlisle in the dark. In fact, sunrise is after 7 a.m. for 61 days next school year. Our children's health, well-being, and safety are being exchanged for the convenience and monetary savings of the bus schedule and the bus driver shortage. We request that Bandelier please be put on the 8:05 schedule for next year. Thank you so much.
Thank you, ma'am. Our next speaker is Vincent LaVolpa. You'll have 2 minutes once you begin speaking. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Vincent LaVolpa. I'm a Purple Heart veteran and a paramedic. My daughter goes to Bandelier. I am also opposing the early start times. So it's been brought to my attention that we're setting a 7:30 start time, but we never had any communication about this. There was no meetings, there was no surveys or polls for us. It was simply just enacted because of middle school and high school students. Now, I did look up some procedural directives, and I do want to commend Albuquerque Public Schools for committing to make decisions using data to inform their thinking. It says under these procedural directives that the decisions are in the best interest of the students with an outcome-based mindset. However, when we looked at the studies at early start times, there was 3 studies from the University of Kentucky, which directly studied the pre and post effects of later school start times on elementary students for both academics and behavioral. And they concluded out of 718 public elementary schools, they looked at performance and standardized tests on math, science, social studies, writings, and as well as behavior. Their conclusions, I'm going to quote this one, their conclusions say, delaying middle school and high school start times at the expense of making elementary school start times earlier might be a bad idea. Our findings suggest that these policy changes may be simply shifting the problems from adolescents to younger children. So respectfully, I'm going to request that our student start times begin at 8:05 a.m. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Our next speaker is Zachary Kareem. You have 2 minutes once you begin speaking.
Hello, my name is Zachary Kareem. I'm a father of 2 daughters at Bandelier Elementary School, and I'm here standing as a proponent against the new start time that has been issued for our students this year. As the last 2 speakers have mentioned, there have been studies done about this, and more specifically, the CDC, as well as the American Academy of Sleep Medicine, have strongly encouraged younger children get more sleep. This new time will change a lot of this. I'd also like to talk about transparency a bit. I know we were given opportunities to give feedback in surveys, and there were things that are very important to our educational system, like teacher development, extending the school calendar to reach new mandates, as well as changing start times for the high schools and middle schools. And there was a mention of possibly changing other start times. However, the specifics for those start times weren't really spoken aloud, or we didn't really hear those in the surveys, so it could impact those schedules. Now, our school specifically started at 9 o'clock. Moving it back an hour and a half is a great impact to our community and our children specifically. So I ask you strongly to reconsider the 7:30 start time and possibly push forward an 8:05 start. Thanks.
Thank you, sir. Our next speaker is Sarah Vogelweed. Ma'am, you'll have 2 minutes once you begin speaking. Thank you.
All right. I'm also a parent of 2 Bandelier students right here. The vast majority of our Bandelier community believes that a 7:30 a.m. start time is too early and Bandelier should move to the 8 to 3 schedule. Otherwise, our students will be walking to school in the dark most of the year, which is simply unsafe, especially crossing dangerous streets like Carlisle and Girard. Bandelier's incredibly small bus riding population could be serviced at a slightly later time while still maintaining middle and high school routes. Further, Bandelier is unwilling to lose precious teachers who have families of their own and are unable to get children to where they need to be in the early mornings. And unless duty teachers are scheduled and paid to arrive earlier and stay later than students, our campus will not be safe for children at drop-off and pickup. Many parents who have several students will have a split between multiple school start and end times. Elementary school should start at 8, middle school at 8:30, and high school at 9 in a graduated order that would be less of a burden on families. We have chosen to bring our children to an APS school despite many other options. We believe in this district and want to continue to support it, knowing that our voice matters and is heard. Concerned Bandelier families ask that you move Bandelier to the 8 to 3 schedule, as we have in mind the best interest of our students and teachers. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Our next speaker is Jonathan Hoffman. Jonathan Hoffman. Okay. Oh, maybe it's Don Hoffman. Sorry. I think there was a problem with the first name on this one. Sorry, ma'am. You'll have 2 minutes once you begin speaking.
My daughter was violently attacked by another student on May 2nd at Manzano High School. This incident occurred in the gym during a PE class with at least one teacher and numerous students present. This attack was witnessed by many students with no desire to step in or help a young lady who was completely helpless. In fact, one student was clearly made aware of this attack in advance for the purpose of recording this premeditated act. The offender in this incident received discipline that enabled her to approach my daughter 3 days later on school campus from behind, grab her arm, and want to know if she was filing criminal charges against her. I'm interested in discussing this matter with members of the district. I have been for 2 weeks actively calling and emailing members of the board, members of the district, and I have not received one phone call back from anyone. I've talked to members at the Student Services Center who assured me that they would get this to the correct people. I have talked to the assistant for the assistant superintendent in charge of our school. I have not heard back from him. I'm disappointed that incidents like this are happening in our schools. I'm disappointed that it was handled the way it was handled. I am disappointed that the members of the district are not able to confront the situation in the way that it should be handled, and that you have to become this crazy parent to get attention in this district about situations like this. Students as well as staff are not safe at the Albuquerque Public Schools. Our school board and our district is leading this city to believe that students are safe and protected in schools, and a recent decision to have zero tolerance for firearms on school campuses is a great step towards safe schools in this crazy world we're living in. However, what is being done to send a message to students and families that violence of any kind will not be tolerated on school campuses? I am aware.
Mrs. Hoffman, I'm sorry. I'm sorry I have to stop you. I need you to finish in one quick sentence, please.
Do something to keep these kids safe and stop allowing violent kids to take over and intimidate their teachers and their classmates in the Albuquerque Public School.
Thank you, ma'am. Our next speaker is Judith Siegel. I want to make sure the names are right. Judith is your first name? Okay. You'll have 2 minutes once you begin speaking. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Judith Siegel and my son attends Bandelier Elementary. I'm here today to speak about the proposed bell schedule changes for the upcoming school year. I am well aware of the unfortunate bus driver shortage here in Albuquerque and nationwide, and I sincerely hope that APS's efforts to obtain more bus drivers are successful. Because as parents, we are told that this shortage is what drives this unprecedented 7:30 start time for half of the elementary schools. For some families and schools, this change is not significant, but for us at Bandelier, this is a huge change. We are now being forced to start 90 minutes early from 9 a.m. to 7:30 a.m. There is a disconnect between how these two elementary groups were created and their current and proposed start times. Let me elaborate. Of the schools that will now be starting at 8:05, 75% of them currently start before 8 a.m. Of the schools that will now be starting at 7:30, 56 of them currently start around 9 a.m. Why are the schools that are already starting before 8 the ones that will now be starting later at 8:05? Why are the schools that start closer to 9 the ones that will now start at 7:30? Was a mistake made when creating these two groups? It seems that these two groups need to be switched and that current start times should be taken into consideration. It makes more sense for families and teachers that are already starting at 8 to start at 7:30. It does not make sense for schools that start around 9 to start at 7:30. We've already lost teachers at Bandelier because of this change, and many families are now considering transferring schools. In conclusion, please shift Bandelier to the 8:05 schedule and not the 7:30 schedule. Thank you for the opportunity to speak today.
Thank you, ma'am. Our next speaker is Lexi Cazares. You have 2 minutes once you begin speaking.
Hello. So I'm also a Bandelier and Wilson Middle School parent. I have two issues. So about start time, Bandelier is mostly a community school. So the transfers don't get bused to school and the kids walking from the neighborhood walk to school. So they have one bus that picks up kids from Mesa del Sol and then two buses for special education. I'm just requesting a later start time if possible. It will be dark when a lot of kids are walking during the winter months. My daughter has to cross Carlisle and it's already crazy with the crossing guard and daylight. I realize the issues with needing to stagger the buses and being able to get everyone to school. I'm hoping that the few buses that transport to Bandelier are not significant and somehow could be rearranged so that we could have a later elementary start time, like 8 a.m. at least. I've heard that some of the teachers are not that excited about the new start time and may be looking for other job opportunities. Bandelier, though not an official community school, really is a community school, and I'm requesting a later start time for the safety of the students and the morale of the teachers. I have another emerging issue at Wilson Middle School. Wilson has had an outstanding gifted and accelerated program over the past decade, and I just want someone to be aware that this program seems to be disintegrating, and I'm very disappointed. I have an upcoming fifth grader that I was really hoping would benefit from the didactics that Wilson has offered in the past years. And it seems most upcoming Bandelier fifth graders have applied for transfers to go to Jefferson. I just urge someone to look into what's happening with the administration and the teachers at Wilson because it's a good school. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Celeste Wheat. You'll have 2 minutes once you begin speaking.
Good evening, board members. My name is Celeste Tweed, and I am the sole owner of Two Steps Ahead Childcare. We were abruptly shut down on May 10th, less than 6 hours of notice. My goal for our program is no child would be left alone or left unsafe. I wanted to provide quality, affordable care and to make ESL quality and fun for all of the children, which means that whatever the teachers cannot do anymore in class, like when you talk about a volcano, in my day and in our program, we built the volcano, we watch it erupt. They get more than just the textbook that they get in class. APS shut us down. We followed and complied with all contracts. I'm pleading here today with all of you to please give us back our program. I ask you to do what is right for the children and for the community that I have served on the west side, Sunset View, for the past 16 years. I was when the schools opened, and I'm very, very upset the way that things were handled, especially for me, my staff, and the children. My parents, nobody has given answers. I get phone calls to this day. If I have hurt a child, if anybody of my staff have hurt a child, if a child was inappropriately touched or anything for just the abrupt closure. So again, I'm here to plead with you to please give us our program back.
Thank you, ma'am. Our next speaker is Crystal Baca. You have 2 minutes once you begin speaking.
Hi, board members. My name's Crystal, and I have a kindergartner that goes to Sunset View Elementary. I'm here seeking answers today of the abrupt closure of the Sunset View Two Steps program. Just to put a picture in your guys' mind, to paint a picture for you guys on how this affected my son. The night that the program closed, from what we were told, was indefinitely. I had to break the news to my son that night and tell him that the Two Steps Ahead program was shut down. With tears in his eyes and a frog in his throat, my son asked me, am I ever going to see my Two Steps Ahead staff members ever again? The last time my son was that upset was when my grandpa, his great-grandfather, passed away. So if that doesn't paint a picture in your mind, I don't know what will. I've started a new job with the federal government. I have an essential mission to meet with my job. And ever since Two Steps Ahead has been shut down, I've been late to my job every single day. And I just can't find, the next thing was, YMCA. The YMCA wanted to charge me $2,700 for 9 weeks when Two Steps Ahead would have charged me that in 18 weeks. So just so you guys know, I emailed everyone and their mother at APS, the PED, the AG's office, KRQE, Larry Barker. I can't get an answer from anybody. I called Scott Elder's office. I spoke with his assistant, who was very rude, wouldn't give me any answers. I also reached out to Amanda DeBell. Amanda DeBell also would refuse to speak with me or my son's dad, and said that when the program was closed down, parents and students were not taken into consideration, that they just shut it down. She said she would give us a call back in regards to what was going on with the program. We have yet to hear back from anyone at APS. The only one that I can ever contact that will ever pick up the phone is Celeste, and she doesn't have answers either. Another thing is with the Two Steps Ahead program being shut down, my son is now at the YMCA where he's being bullied for his snack because APS promised that they would give the kids summer lunch. And they took that away from the kids. Now my son's being bullied and older kids are taking his food and eating his food.
Ms. Bach, I'm sorry, you're going over your 2 minutes. Can you wrap up in one quick sentence?
So I have a list here of questions I would like answered. I will give that to somebody. I know your guys' mission is to educate and care for our students and to collaborate with the community, but everyone that I spoke to at APS has failed to do all of those things. So I hope that you guys can live up to the mission, and like Celeste said, no child left behind. I'm going to fight for my son and what's good and conducive to his education and his well-being.
Thank you, ma'am. You have something to give to the board? I'll take care of that. Thank you. Our next speaker is Alexandria Gonzalez. You'll have 2 minutes once you begin speaking. Thank you.
I would like to first say that what I have to say and what happened to me and my student is going to take a little longer than 2 minutes to describe. So I would ask that, you know, there be another time that I can elaborate more on what happened. But my daughter was also a victim of a brutal attack at school on May 2nd. And she was in a bathroom stall, which was the only bathroom open at the school lunchtime, and was supposed to be being monitored by a student, a staff member, and it wasn't. She was repeatedly stabbed in the chest with an object that burned across her chest, and was slammed into a metal desk in the middle of the hallway that a duty teacher was supposed to be at when she did try to escape. I was on an open line with her the entire time she was experiencing what happened. And I was unable to call anyone or anyone at the school. After reading the student disciplinary matrix and the handbook that you guys have out front of your office out here, I'm just in shock that the only consequences that are really required of any kind of these types of incidences is just student contact and a parent contact conference. There is no requirement for suspension. There is no requirement that says these students are going to be safe in school. And honestly, what you guys have underneath your bench right there that says student outcomes don't change until adult behavior changes, I believe 100%. We need to start holding kids who commit these violent crimes against other students accountable and getting them out of school and suspending them for these violent acts that they commit against other students. My daughter is a straight A student who never missed a day of class for 5 years, and to watch her make the heartbreaking decision to not go to school for the rest of the school year and miss out on all her 8th grade activities and celebrations because she's in such fear of what other students will do to her is just it's so traumatizing as a parent to experience and to try to be strong for your child when you know that there's no real disciplinary actions that are being enforced. You feel defeated. And these students that go to these schools.
Ms. Gonzalez, I'm sorry, you've gone over 2 minutes. Can you please wrap up in a very quick sentence?
I just ask that you please start enforcing rules and enforcing the safety at schools, because I believe that it will help with the other incidences that we see on the media that are, you know, very widespread. And I ask that you guys start going. The progressive disciplinary action just doesn't work, and it's just leading to more violence in schools.
Thank you, ma'am. Our next speaker is Elizabeth Carter. It's for the board. Okay. What was your name, ma'am? You were the first one, right? Ma'am, I'm sorry. Give me 1 second. It was Julia? Okay. I'm gonna lower his head down. Ma'am, I'm sorry. You have 2 minutes once you begin speaking. Sorry.
No problem. Good morning, afternoon. My name's Elizabeth Carter. I'm here speaking about the closure of Two Steps Ahead program at Sunset View Elementary. It was very disturbing to me to receive a text message on May 10th at 12:30. Program was closing that evening at 6 p.m. It was frustrating because I sent all of you, including Mr. Elder and Monica Armenta, an email regarding this issue like an hour and a half later. The only one I ever received a response from was Monica Armenta, and that was 6 days later, saying that her office had nothing to do with it and that somebody in the administration was looking into what occurred. In the email I sent, I asked specific questions. Was this due to a safety issue? Why wasn't a survey sent out or parents are asked about the choices at that school? I have not yet to receive a response from anybody else at APS, just like everybody else here. It seems to be a problem in getting a hold of people. And I just want to say, like, we as parents should know why it was closed. What was the reasoning behind that? It left us parents scrambling, trying to find childcare for the rest of the school year. We had already signed up our kids for the summer program that they offered at that school. The date that they made this decision, all the other community centers registrations for their summer program had already been closed. So our children are on waiting lists. Me personally, I have a job where they're flexible, where I can work from home, or I could take my granddaughter to work. And I've had to send her with family members in Espanola just because of this childcare issue. Post-COVID-19, it is difficult for families to get childcare. And then you take away another option that we parents had. The 2 steps met our hours, our schedules. They opened at 6:30. A lot of us that live on that side have to cross the river to work here.
Mrs. Carter, I'm sorry, I have to stop you. You've gone over your 2 minutes. Can you please wrap up in a quick sentence?
This is why I believe that APS enrollment continues to decline, because parents are getting fed up and they're moving their students out to charter schools, private schools, or out of district schools, or homeschooling them. And I think that we as parents deserve to know the reason why they were closed down. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Okay, our next 3 speakers are on Zoom. Kayla Ornelius didn't respond, so I'm going to move on to Janelle Astorga. Janelle, are you there?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay, Janelle, you have 2 minutes once you begin speaking, please.
Thank you. Good evening, Board President Montoya Cordova, members of the board, and Superintendent Elder. My name is Janela Astorga Ramos, and I'm a co-founder of Youth Voices in Action under the Learning Alliance of New Mexico. And I'm also a candidate running for school board in District 1. I want to remind you today that zero tolerance policies do not work, and we need to stop criminalizing our young people. Suspension and expulsion are band-aid solutions to a problem that we have seen far too many times. We are once again only providing reactive consequences instead of enacting proactive solutions. I understand the fear and the magnitude of a situation where there might be a weapon brought onto school campuses, especially by another student. However, our goal should not be to wait and push yet another student away from their education, community, and resources. Our goals should be to institute policies and funding to support students and teachers before it even gets to that point of helplessness and violence. We need to give students a space to vocalize their questions, misunderstandings, feelings, and vulnerabilities. We need to create a better community where all students feel safe in their schools before situations like this arise, not after. I urge you to vote no to an expulsion for life policy and start voting to protect our youth by solving the root cause of the problem, which is getting guns off of our streets and allowing youth to feel heard and valued in their schools. I also want to reach out to all of those parents that had made statements today about violence in their schools and the board not being responsive, and let them know that there are community organizations out there who will help them. One of those is Youth Voices in Action, or VIA. Thank you so much.
Thank you, ma'am. Okay, Kayla Ornelius did respond. Kayla, are you there? Kayla, are you there? Okay, she's not, I'm not being able to hear her. So I'm going to go to the next person, which is also on Zoom, Isabella Moya. She's joining now. Miss Moya, are you there?
Yes, I'm here. Sorry.
That's okay. Miss Moya, you have 2 minutes once you begin speaking.
Thank you. Hello, Madam Chair and members of the board. My name is Isabella Moya. I am the co-executive director of the Learning Alliance of New Mexico, and I'm here today to speak against an initiative that aims to further criminalize students in our Albuquerque schools. Banning any student who might bring a weapon to school permanently from attending any school is a zero tolerance approach that does not take into account any form of restorative justice. Zero tolerance processes are proven to be ineffective in creating safer schools and only further ensure that students are not able to learn and be successful in their endeavors after high school. Learning Alliance of New Mexico and our youth program, Youth Voices in Action, firmly believe that youth are the solution and not the problem, and continuing to criminalize young people in our city is and will continue to do more harm than good. I am asking the board to please take into account that this initiative does not aim to protect our students and to stand with the students that you represent. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Okay, moving on. Our next speaker is Deborah Marispaca. You have 2 minutes once you begin speaking. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair, board members, and superintendent. My name is Deborah. I'm a volunteer with New Mexico Moms Demand Action. Moms Demand Action is a nationwide gun violence prevention movement. We advocate for data-driven solutions to prevent gun violence. You all have been given access to the well-researched study, Keeping Our Schools Safe. We gave that study to you all. Nowhere in that study does it say that a zero-tolerance disciplinary practice is an answer to gun violence. Specifically, permanent expulsion as a consequence is not a practice that reduces gun violence, nor has it been shown to deter a student from bringing a firearm to school. Adults are responsible for securely storing firearms. Every adult gun owner has a moral and now legal obligation in New Mexico to prevent youth from accessing firearms. The heavy lifelong consequence of permanent expulsion should not be laid on youth. Gratefully, the APS district has agreed to add more secure firearm storage language to their student parent handbook. But the district can do more to prevent gun violence and put secure firearm storage information into the hands of adult student caregivers. New Mexico Moms Demand Action recently met with the superintendent and gave him several suggestions on how to do just that. We need to focus on prevention. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. We're going to try Kayla one more time. Kayla, are you there? You rejoined?
Yes, I'm so sorry. I had
That's
some
okay. You're great. We can hear you perfectly. Okay, you have 2 minutes once you begin speaking now.
Okay, thank you. I'm calling on behalf of the Sunset View Two Steps Ahead program. Our family was very fortunate to have such a positive experience at Two. The staff members, Miss Celeste, Miss Gabby, and Miss Lizzie, have established strong connections with my daughter as well as the other children. They've taught them valuable life skills. They treat their children with love, respect, and kindness, and they expect that to be throughout their program. However, my daughter was very confused when her favorite after-school activity abruptly stopped and without any explanation. The sudden change left us searching for other alternatives within our family, and we don't have family here in Albuquerque. Additionally, we are also disappointed that the summer program was also canceled, and we had other programs available, but since the enrollment, just like the other parent had said, had been open for such a long time, there was no room for my child. I also reached out to APS numerous times without any callbacks, and I feel that APS should have been transparent with their communication with the families regarding this program instead of a 6-hour abrupt closure. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, ma'am. Okay. The next speaker I have on Zoom is Emma Jones. I was waiting for Jonathan Juarez and Kathleen Mosley, but neither joined. So Emma, I'm going to give you 2 minutes once you begin speaking.
Thank you. Madam President, members of the board, my name is Emma Jones. I'm a parent and a youth organizer here in Albuquerque, where I've been working with students and families for over 15 years. I'm here to comment on the permanent expulsion policy for students with firearms. This is one of those policies that is very much so rooted in good hearts and with good intentions, but ultimately would have a negative impact on students of color, students with disabilities, and mental and behavioral health issues, which can also be proven by APS's own data on search and seizure, on expulsion and suspension, which are much higher for students of color, particularly African-American and Native American students. But as a parent, I can also tell you that I've had to deal with my own fair share of mental and behavioral health crises with my own student. When I was in that moment, I was a mess. I was dealing with so much emotions and guilt and fear about my child and where I went wrong. And on top of that, I was also tasked with navigating a very under-resourced mental and behavioral health system in our state and our schools that was more focused on punishing my student for her mental illness than to helping her get the help that she desperately needed. And that was extremely difficult. And I can imagine it's a lot harder for a parent that isn't as well connected in their community as I am. So for so many of us, the school is our family's first line of support when you're in a crisis. Students and families have gone through these types of mental and behavioral health crises are often just pushed out. And yes, it's so much easier to wash our hands with students who are problem children than it is to figure out the solution. But that doesn't mean that students and families don't care and that they aren't trying to figure it out and that they don't desperately need and want the help. Ultimately, the district should invest our good hearts and intentions, our time and our resources on solutions that prioritize prevention, intervention, and support services. We should be thinking about building partnerships with mental and behavioral health service providers and community-based organizations that support students in thriving in their everyday lives. When incidents like this does happen, we should be looking for training APS police to practice restorative justice, which APS had committed to a few years ago, and it has fallen flat. And we should be working with families to navigate following up care for children who have mental and behavioral health problems, not pushing them out. I
Hey,
really
Ms.
believe
Jones,
that
I
we
have
can
to,
keep-
I have to stop you. You've gone over your 2 minutes.
Okay.
If you could wrap it up in a very quick sentence, please.
Yep, that was my last sentence. So I really believe
Awesome.
that we can keep students safe as long as we're not pushing out students and we're making the commitment to do that prevention, important prevention. So thank you all so much.
Thank you, ma'am. Our next speaker is Kathleen Mosley. Kathleen, I see you there.
Yes,
Okay, you have 2 minutes once you begin speaking.
thank you, board chair members and Superintendent Kathy Mosley. I'm member of New Mexico Moms Demand Action and a retired public health nurse. New Mexico ranks third among states for gun violence death rates, leaving many of us feeling afraid for our safety. We need to acknowledge our level of risk and fear and then take extra care to make policy decisions that are based on research evidence and outcomes and other schools' experiences, rather than what makes us feel safe. The American Psychological Association guides us by recommending a comprehensive and layered approach, emphasizing primary prevention, anti-bullying, and for firearms, emphasizing parental and community firearm storage using our New Mexico New Benny Hargrove Act. Secondary prevention includes our school threat assessments that link agencies. Tertiary prevention includes alternate discipline that continues engagement. Excluded children must not get lost between school, law enforcement, CYFD, when families struggle. This makes schools and all of us less safe. Thank you very much.
Thank you, ma'am. Our next speaker is Jonathan Morris. He is also on Zoom. Jonathan, are you there?
I am. Can you hear me?
We can. You'll have 2 minutes once you begin speaking.
Thank you so much. Good evening. Thank you so much, Madam Chair, members of the board, for the opportunity to speak today. My name is Jonathan Juarez. I am a product, first and foremost, of your school system, as well as a co-founder of Fight for Our Lives Albuquerque, a student-run anti-gun violence organization. I'm also a candidate for City Council District 6. I'm here today to speak briefly about proposed disciplinary policy changes regarding students bringing firearms on campus that would result in permanent student expulsion. Now, I graduated from APS in 2020, so this debate feels pretty fresh for me. I understand greatly the need for safety within our schools, and I personally bore witness to APS's attempts to ensure my classmates' safety over the last 15 years. I've endured multiple active shooter drills multiple times over the past 6 years of my education, but I also remember the failures of many APS disciplinary policies and how they were applied unjustly and with bias from administration. It took 4 years of public outcry to this board to release the statistics on disciplinary action. And when that happened, it was only public for 2 years before you made it private again, because it exposed an overwhelming disparity where Black and Indigenous students were expelled at a much higher rate, despite making up the lowest demographics of your school district. I ask that the board reconsider this proposed disciplinary policy in cases where violence towards students is not a factor, and consider a more restorative justice approach to students bringing guns on campus accidentally or without desire to do harm. I do not believe in destroying lives for one understandably major mistake. And since graduation, I've also learned that, it's very important that we offer second chances, and we should do this exact same for our students. Thank you so much for the opportunity to speak today.
Thank you, Mr. Juarez. Our next speaker is Elaine Miller. After Elaine will be Mr. Briggs. And after that will be Mr. Cardinal. You'll have 2 minutes once you begin speaking.
Hello, I'm a little hoarse. I'm getting over a cold, but I want to thank the board chair, members, and superintendent. My name is Elaine, and I'm representing New Mexico Moms Demand Action. We know that guns are showing up inside our schools at an unprecedented rate over the last few years. Guns do not belong in schools. Our children, teachers, school staff, and entire community are at risk. Our public schools and law enforcement departments have taken a number of important steps to keep our students safe once guns are found at schools. But we need to focus on prevention. What we're seeing here is the consequence of a guns everywhere mindset. There are so many firearms in our community that law enforcement and our schools can't even figure out where the kids are getting them from. We congratulate APS for featuring secure firearm storage prominently in your handbook. Adults bear responsibility for this crisis. Children should not pay the penalty of permanent expulsion. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Mr. Briggs? You have 2 minutes, sir, when you begin speaking.
Good evening, Board and Superintendent Elder. I'm reflecting on 42 years as an employee of APS. One thing I was real disappointed about is see the Gold Bar celebration banquet discontinued to represent people like Helen Fox and Ruthie Owens a year ago. That was very, very powerful. I'm also here to support continued growth in community schools. Some of the issues I hear parents talking about tonight, they authored by Representative Elizabeth Thompson, suggested by the governor of New Mexico to have community schools. And she was interested in the fact to see a smile on Representative Thompson's face when she said, my son went to community school in 2001. That was Grant Middle School, where I was honored to be the principal for 13 years. As a principal Grant, we were funded by Albuquerque City Council, Atlantic Philanthropic. Many of the issues I see parents talking about tonight, the increased enrollment happened at Grant after community school started, increased student learning, increased test scores, improved safety, decrease in vandalism, increased cultural pride, and even increased voting turnout. Also, boys clubs and girls clubs and YMCA, which would provide before and after school program for kids. The 5-year plan, I really compliment you on as a past high school assistant and middle school principal. But if you don't have magic in the middle with middle schools, what happens? At Truman Middle School and Grant Middle School, we had a no waiver policy. I provided you with documents on the table tonight. We started contracting with every kid for academic success. If you had below a 2.0, or you had 2 more Fs, you were on grade monitoring every 2 weeks, basically an IEP, special ed style, my background is special ed. We monitored over 300 to 400 kids at the start of the school year that were not performing academically. At the end of the year, we had 10. That's how you build success for the high schools. If not, middle school kids go to high school with no work ethic and no knowledge of credits. And all of a sudden, as a high school student principal, I'd see students say, what do you mean I'm a freshman again? They had no credits. Middle school allowed kids to social promote. Social promotion is a damaged item which will violate any kind of intervention you do if you continue having social promotion in middle school. I go to middle school 3 years, so I go to high school.
Mr. Briggs, I'm sorry, I have to stop you. I need you to wrap up in one quick sentence.
A combination of the community school and the grade monitoring brought great success to Grant Middle School, which was supported by Robert Hennick at West Mesa and Sandia. It was supported by Tim Wade, the late principal. He's deceased now at Manzano. Please continue the community schools. Think about elimination of social promotion and have academic interventions at middle school level to build success for kids for high school. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. And our last speaker tonight is Mr. Mike Cardinal. Mr. Cardinal, you have 2 minutes once you begin speaking.
All right. Good evening, everybody. I appreciate the opportunity to address this group here tonight. I'll be speaking about the 2 Steps Ahead after school program. As you've heard from several parents today, Ms. Celeste herself, the program was abruptly shut down without any explanation. I certainly echo the sentiment that parents should be involved in any process that impacts our kids. and our lives so dramatically in that way. Both my wife and I work, and we received calls at work. All of our emergency contacts received calls because they couldn't get a hold of us because we were in meetings, saying that our child was alone after school and need to be picked up urgently. It was not a great experience. And definitely, again, I echo the sentiment that we would like to have an explanation for why this program was closed. And the reason I'm standing up here today is short of impropriety on the staff. I would ask that the Two Steps Ahead program is reopened immediately. I would ask that it's opened tomorrow so that our kids can, for the reasons expressed by other parents here very eloquently, continue to benefit from the community, the collaboration, and the enrichment that this program provided. And I will leave it there. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, sir. And board members, that concludes public forum.
All right. Thank you. I just want to say thank you to all the parents and community members that came out tonight. But the two moms that spoke specifically about violence, we do have our service center coordinator back here, and we also have a representative from our law enforcement. So I really would like for you to connect with them if possible immediately. If you guys could raise your hands, they'll know who to connect with. Okay. All right. I want you to know who to connect with APS. There you go. So just connect with those folks if you wouldn't mind, because that would help you to get some assistance. Appreciate all the feedback on everything else. We certainly will discuss this with the superintendent in terms of some of the solutions for some of the concerns that were raised tonight. So thank you so much for being here. And with that, it's not problem solving time, obviously. So we're going to go ahead and continue on with our board meeting. Thank you. So our next item for action is the consent agenda. Let me get these. There's a little bit of commotion in the room, so Barbara and Crystal will just wait till folks are clearing out, because we did have quite a group. Okay, so our next item for action is the consent agenda. The only item that is pulled off is item 4. So do I have approval? Not approval, but do I have a motion for consents 1, 2, and 3?
I will move to approve the consent agenda items for 5.1, 5.2, and 5.3.
I'll second. This is Peggy. All right. May I have a roll call on that, please?
Peggy Mueller-Aragon.
Yes.
Danielle Gonzalez.
Yes.
Barbara Peterson.
Yes.
Crystal Tapia Romero.
Yes.
Josefina Dominguez.
Yes.
Courtney Jackson.
Yes.
Yolanda Montoya Cordova.
Yes. So our next item is consideration for approval of the joint Title I, Title II, and Title III grant application for the school year for 2023, 2024, this discussion action. And I'll just open it up for questions. Board Member Mueller-Aragon, you had a question?
I do have some. So I'm not sure who will be able to answer these. I know you answered most of the questions that we had, but not everything. So, I mean, I have a question on, I think it was on page 36 of the digital. So there was a salary there of 165,000. Is that just for one person for the all director? Is that just one salary?
Board Member Mueller-Aragon, I will defer this question to Executive Director Gormley.
Thank you.
Good evening, Board Member Mueller-Aragon and board members and Superintendent Elder. That is one person's salary. That includes the 6% raise and the cost of benefits.
Okay. That is, I just found some other things out about some changes to the salary bands, and I'll ask that question in a minute, but just to kind of point out that somebody with in New Mexico that has like an MBA, it gets paid like $68,000. The average master's, somebody with a master's, and I'm not sure what the all director has, for sure a master's in the United States is like under 70,000. And in New Mexico, the annual per capita per year is about 31,000. And the median household income is 54,000. So when we're paying $165,000 for one person, and that is a pretty new program, right? That's only been around the all program last year and this year, right?
Actually, that program is how I got my administrative license, and that was in, I think, 2013, maybe 10 years ago. So that program has been around at least 10 years.
And has that director, the all director, been there since 2013?
So the position is a principal support specialist level. So that position gets paid the same level as principal support specialist, and it's always been at that level as far as I am aware.
Okay, it'd be good to see how that's gone up from 2013, because that is a very high salary.
Well, Board Member
and
Miller,
that-
let me
yes.
remind you, that's not the salary.
That is benefits and et cetera. I understand that.
And they do have to have principal experience.
I understand that.
Principal pay has gone up quite a bit over the last few years. So the base has gone up just based on what we've done at the state level in terms of increasing principal pay. So you have to see a commensurate raise around that.
I understand that. I just want everybody to hear that.
Can I
So
just
the
ask a
next-
quick follow-up on, what's the percentage on of benefits? What is it, like 30, 40%? What are we?
Up there in
38? Okay.
37, 38%.
Okay.
So then I don't know who this will go to, but I know we're talking about Read 180. And I looked through the numbers that you sent, the Read 180 data. And I know that there isn't a third-party review to, just look at the data to verify things, that this is working well for children and student outcomes are improving. And then I see some of the blame here going on to the children. It's not the children, because they obviously are able to learn. So I looked through, and I think there was the 29 schools that were listed for Read 180. I think it said 80% of them were at basic or below basic. And I think there was 5 schools that didn't have any, had no children there. So when you're looking at a program where 80% are at basic or below basic, and then you don't have an independent review. And I know you said that Michelle was going to, start looking at that. And then just talking about all these different barriers, we just want, or I just want programs that are going to work and that you can prove are working for the kids. And I don't want the blame on the children. So I just want to know if you are, when we're going to hear from Ms. Drummond about some of that review of Read 180. And I think it's the same thing for Math 180.
So Board Member Mueller-Aragon, if I may just interject a little bit here. I think those things will all come as part of our progress monitoring. Because if we're making that investment and we're paying for those, then when we get our progress monitoring reports and we're looking at, especially on our literacy goal, how is that all tying there? I think that's going to be when and how we're going to learn. You're absolutely correct. We've not received that kind of information in the past, but like right now, it's a strategy or it's an intervention that the school district is planning to put in place. And then for us as board members, when we're progress monitoring and we're looking at it, if we're getting to student outcomes that we like and that we're seeing that's making progress, then we'll know that there's efficacy in all of the things that they're making investments towards.
How long have you all been using? I know it's not mandated as well, right? So you don't have to use Read 180. How long has that been used? How many years for the schools that do use it?
Board Member Mueller-Aragon probably can't quantify the exact date. I know that we began using it while I was principal at McKinley Middle School, which was in the early 2000s. So I'm thinking around 2005. And then we were using in the high schools when I was at Highland in 2010 through 14. What I will tell you about Read 180 is I completely agree with you. It's not the children. It is the fidelity of the program. When I was at one of the schools, I had a highly efficient, highly effective Read 180 teacher who drove significant changes and gains in what I saw in our students, and she could measure those improvements. That's one thing Read 180 does, is it gives you some scores that you can actually work with and gives you a sense of where the breakdowns are coming. However, when the program is not being utilized as effectively, then you don't see the same results. This could be one of the areas, and I don't know this for sure, and it probably isn't, but this could be an area where when we are talking about training and retraining, this could be an area where we have to rethink who's doing the Read 180. Because in many cases, and at one point, it was basically the only intervention we had for high school students. There's very few reading interventions for high school. I think there's probably more now, and we can consider other options as we move forward. But there was a reason we went into that program. It was the best of what was offered specifically for the older kids. And where it's done right with the teacher, it's not the kids.
Nope.
It's the teacher.
So I mean, when you're saying that it was, I mean, I thought it had been around for a while just because, you know, I was still teaching in 2005. So I know when you're looking at how much data we should have yet, and you know, I've asked for this and asked for it and asked for it, and we haven't received it. And it could have been around for, you know, almost 20 years. So data is there. You just have to give it to us. And I mean, if it's just not working, I think we should have an idea if it's not working. So I'm just going to keep on asking for it. And I understand we'll do progress monitoring, but over the time when we have been using Read 180, we should already have data on it. The way I always say about foundations, we should have a lot of data. So I know you kind of went through, I just want to do a shout out to in Math 180, some of the schools that had such, you know, high growth rate. I want to shout out to them because Wilson, sixth graders, it was like 243, their growth rate. Harrison, 7th grade was 157. George I. Sanchez, 8th graders was like 163. So it's obviously working. And when we're looking at where some of these schools are, you know, we know obviously it has nothing to do with who those children are. So, but then we look at some of the, and if somebody can tell me this, I don't know if you can tell me this. I was looking at the average quartile growth rate for Math 180, and it's at 57. Can you tell me like how did you get to that? Like, what is the algorithm or whatever, because I couldn't figure it out.
So unfortunately, Read 180 and Math 180 are not under Title II. They're funded with Title I funds.
So you're
But
not going to be able
something that Penelope and I have started to have conversations around. And I've also looked at the Read 180 data recently to see where we can support improvement in that program.
Okay, because this was also, you know, because the kids weren't doing this or the kids weren't doing that. And like superintendent said, it's about teachers being able to fully implement it, or maybe the program is just not for our students, and that's okay. So then the other,
Miller Aragon, if
yes,
I may,
yes,
we have online. Let's see if we lost them. We have online the executive director for Title I, Penelope Bouchard.
Oh, okay. I think she's on.
Yeah, you may
I
be
think
you're on mute.
Sorry about that. Okay. Okay. Sorry about that. So the average growth quartile, as it was explained to us through Read 180 and Math 180, staff was, you know, just looking at that average across the all the students that are in the program that have licenses and utilize the program, looking at that average growth. What the data doesn't tell us, and we're kind of working with them to try to figure out how to show this data, is students that maybe exit out of the program midway through the year. So
Right.
both Read 180 and Math 180 are set up so that when students reach proficiency or above proficiency, they're exited out of the program, meaning that they go back to core. And the data as we see it here, it doesn't capture kiddos that have exited out of the program. And so we're looking at trying to figure out how to capture that information, because it is a piece of data that we're missing. How many students are exiting out of program? And of course, this data, to be 100% transparent and honest, this data was pulled on Monday, which is the same, and it was sent to you sent in on Tuesday. So just trying to pull the most recent data, because end of the year data is just starting to come in and flow in. So just trying to pull some of the quick data that we could so that you can see. There are things that we're looking at, and when we look at the data sheets, some of the things that we're looking at are students who rush through the assessments, because we don't believe that we get a true picture of students' academic growth when they take less than 15 minutes to complete that end of the year assessment. We are also looking at teacher training and implementation, as Superintendent Elder talked about. We're looking at our sites that have high teacher implementation, quality implementation at that location, and the data outcomes in those locations versus locations where we don't have programs fully implemented. So those are some of the things that we've been collecting through observations. Our resource teacher that oversees Read 180 and Math 180 has been doing observations in classrooms, and we're starting to put those pictures together so that moving forward, we can look at and say, is it a professional development? We need teachers trained. We need them released from classrooms so they can come train. We need to ensure that for example, Read 180 can be used as a core replacement in 6th grade and 9th grade. Are we maximizing on that so that we can get a 2 years growth, or whatever that individual student growth could be by utilizing this program, that students are given that opportunity, because it is something that we are offering. So just to give you that information as well. Thank you.
And I know I'm sure you're going to be working on trying to figure out how to capture what happens at mid-year. So I'm sure that's something that you can work on, and I'm sure that would improve what some of these numbers look like. And getting children to not rush through, that is also something that is on the teachers to make them show how important it is. So it isn't also to fall at the feet of the children and blaming them, because it's what the teachers are expecting of them. So having high expectations is really important. Thank you for that. And then on, if you could, I'm not sure who can tell me about how many students do we, I know here it said about the McKinney-Vento that we had the average caseload for each FTE was 440 students. So if we have 23, I think 23 or something like that, FTEs, and if each FTE is serving 440 students, is that really that number? Because if you multiply that, it's like thousands. I mean, that would be like 10,000 kids or something. So is that how many kids we're serving? 10,000 children?
Board Member Muller-Aragon, we have the program director online, Miss Crystal Wilson, that can support this.
Okay, because that's trouble. That made me sad, and it's just sad.
Good evening, board members and Superintendent Elder. In response to your question regarding the number of students that our outreach workers are serving, we have within our full-time employees, we have social workers and outreach team members. Families and students are assigned to our outreach team members, and they do have high caseloads. You are correct. So it is not a direct equation to multiply the number of students by the number of FTEs because of the service model that we are using. Families oftentimes need the work of an outreach worker and in collaboration with a social worker. So it's not a direct association between the number of FTEs and the number of students that are served. However, all students are served by resource teachers who work in outreach, and they do average high numbers.
Okay, so what do you think about how many students do you think there are?
As of May 1st, we were serving 3,649 students for this past school year.
Okay, now I mean, that makes me not really feel better, but I just think that there just has to be something else that we can do. That's like 3,600 of our kids. That is just. Okay, I'll just go on. Also with the, and this will be to, I don't know if Antonio is on, about the refugee and newcomer students that we have 700 students, but we only have 2.5 FTEs serving 700 students. I mean, how are those 700 students getting what they need? This just worries me. So I don't know who's there to answer that question. I just think we need more. That's just my personal opinion. So if there isn't anybody here to answer, it's okay. Go ahead.
Board Member Miller Aragon, members of the board, Superintendent Elder, the number that I gave you there, we were at you, the question was in specifically to the 2.53 FTEs. That's only those FTEs that are funded out of Title I dollars. And so there are several other staff members that are paid out of district operational dollars from the Kellogg funding. There are several other staff members that work directly with the refugee students. And so the number that I got from Mr. Baca was, that they're directly working, their team is directly working with about 700 students. And then those individual FTEs are working with about 80 to 90 students on a daily basis. And so they're, again, those 2.53 FTEs are just the ones funded out of the Title I dollars, out of their program dollars.
There's several though that are working above the.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
Better. And then on the interventionists, I saw that there's 5 schools that fell below the 74.5%, and they're going to be held harmless just for a year. So then after the year, are those FTEs going to go away if they are not at the level they need to be at next year? They will.
Yes, board member. Yes, they will. So we have a hold harmless for 1 year clause within the Title I that we can do. And we're holding 5 schools harmless that fell below the 50% threshold for Title I funding in general. And we're applying that same rule to our interventionists, because that way they get 2 years, they'll get the 2 years. Chances if they fall back above that threshold, then they'll continue. But if they don't come back on, then we will have to pull that FTE. Schools are aware of this so that as they go into budget planning next year, they can make those decisions for their school to, how they might be able to fund those.
Okay. That's just concern, that's also concerning because I know interventionists do a good job. And if you just fall just right below that and they're gone, that's concerning for the kids. So then the next question I have, a little bit of a follow-up, is on the teacher leaders. So we don't really have a lot of information from what I read here about whether or not it's having a real impact on, improving student outcomes, if it's really increasing effective instruction and student outcomes. So what are you going to do to see if it's, if maybe the professional development needs to be something different if it's not? So what is your plan to find out if this professional development is working for the teacher leaders or not, and it's affecting student outcomes?
So the teacher leader network is under CNI, and those positions are now being aligned to our board goals directly. And so with things like foundations and the math professional development that we're providing throughout the year next year, we'll be able to look at specifically which teachers attend in the professional development and look at the growth of their students versus somebody who maybe didn't get a foundations kit and go to the foundations training. It's hard to measure professional development because the use of the program is not mandatory. And so the reporting of its use is a teacher response. So are you using? Yes. How much are you using? Oh, I use it a lot. And I know we can ask better questions, and we're beginning to ask a lot more specific questions and look at student data. But so that's what we're working towards. We're not there yet. We have a lot of qualitative information from teachers and how they've seen a difference, but we don't have quantitative data yet.
Okay, and then there were a couple of questions that I had asked, or several more that just somehow got left off of the questions. So I know you guys didn't get them until I noticed when I was looking over them that they weren't answered. So if you can, I know I asked questions about the district level administrators, and when all these positions started, how it's decreased since our enrollment has gone down, and how those positions are affecting student outcomes. And I think I don't know if Ms. King sent those questions, if we can get those answered.
We did send them, Board Member Mueller-Aragon.
Okay.
This afternoon, and we're working on getting the answers.
Okay, because it's important. I didn't realize that there was, well, I had heard it through the grapevine that the new salary bands were done. So I'm going to have some questions about what the cost for those salary bands are, how much more it's adding to our APS budget, and how many district administrators did this. I mean, I'm assuming it affected everybody at district level administration. And just what the average increase was. I'm assuming it was different for different people. And then if I could just I'll send those as well, because that wasn't added into there. So, and then I know you have the other questions about the TSI schools. I went through them and just kind of wanted to have a little bit more information about the CSI and the TSI schools as well. I'm making sure that they have the resources that they needed, and just to see how many were community schools. So I will. The other thing that was interesting to me is about the software decisions, and I don't know who would be able to answer those questions. I saw like all kinds of different software, BrainPop, vocabulary.com, learning A to Z. So there's so many different, there's so many things that we're doing, and I know some of them are probably really working well. I just would really like to know how effective they are. I know the answer was that this request is, it's allowable. You can spend money on software, but allowable and effective for kids is just not the same thing. And I want to make sure, just because it's allowable, I want to know that it's going to be effective and showing data that will prove its effectiveness. So just because it's allowable doesn't mean it's, that it's good. Is it increasing student outcomes? You're saying it ensures, that New Mexico PED ensured that we are in compliance. Compliance is also, again, not effectiveness. And then I think the last question that I have is on the EL, our English language learners. It said that they could get a second device, but the answer to my question as I read it is that second device that they may use is in the classrooms. Is that correct? It's not a second device that the kids have to carry one device and then have to carry another device. Because I know it's used for different things. It said it could be for an iPad. It could be used for headphones and microphones. I just don't want to have the kids going around having to carry, unless it's good for them to carry two of them.
Board Member Mueller-Aragon, I'm not certain if Angela Rodriguez is online to support Title III application.
I'm here.
Okay. I will defer this question to her.
Thank you.
Good evening, Board Member Aragon. Let me get my
camera, there we are. The device is just used if there are supplemental computer type of items, then those would be used strictly in the ELD classroom. Students would not be walking around with two different devices. They are solely to enhance what has already been distributed at the tier 1 level to every student.
Okay, I just want to make sure, hopefully that works for those ELD kids. So I just want to make sure, but I just thought if they were carrying around two devices, that would be a little bit difficult.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam President.
Okay, Barbara Peterson, Board Member Peterson, you had your hand up. You're on mute. Barbara, you're on mute.
Thank you.
Okay.
You think I'd remember after all this time? Just a couple of things. I mean, I certainly share Board Member Mueller-Aragon's concern about the just small number of resources we have for refugee and our McKinney-Bento kids. And the problem with title funds is that it's finite. It's very finite. And so we end up needing to figure out other ways of insufficient covering things when the resources we have are insufficient. But I want to go back to Read 180 for just a minute, because I think this conversation is sort of indicative of a bigger challenge that we face as we look at student outcomes and how we are measuring them. I have a friend who used Read 180, and she has been receiving accolades from all of the Read 180 people, from her school administrators, from everyone imaginable, about the growth that her students showed on Read 180. Well, the reality is that she did the absolute minimum that she could possibly do with Read 180, and had students reading real literature for the rest of the time and engaging in meaningful conversation, and did not follow with fidelity. So I think we need to be careful of what data and fidelity shows us and what it doesn't show us. That the process of learning is much more complex. And all of these things, whether it's foundations, whether it's or Read 180, or the science of reading materials, all of these things that we get are tools. And if we do not give teachers the ability to figure out how to use those tools for the students they have, it's all for naught. There is not a curricular silver bullet. And I've been listening a whole lot to some of the science of reading material, looking at it. It is old stuff. It is not brand new. It's stuff that we've known for a long time, just like phonics and all of those things we've known and used. It's a matter of how do we implement. And that goes back to, I mean, we seem to be, and I absolutely agree that it is not students to blame, but we seem to be very ready to blame teachers for what they do or don't do, for what their lacks or divergences from fidelity are. But if we do not set up a system that respects teachers and gives teachers time to figure out how to use any of these tools well with the students they have, there is not a silver bullet. And I think we need to be really cautious when we look at data, at diving deeper, and not just doing the superficial 10-minute they're teaching with fidelity or not, but what's really going on. And it's harder. The methodology is definitely complex, if non-existent. But if we are going to serve our students well, I think we need to delve deeper into what the conditions are that are making some classrooms really and truly successful and which classrooms aren't, and then not to shame, blame, or fire teachers, but how do we make sure that every student in every classroom gets from their teacher what they need? And that's a much more difficult and complex process, but it's one that as we launch in further to our student outcome focused governance, I think it's something that we need to keep on the front burner all the time.
Thank you, board member. Any other comments on this section or questions? No? Do I have a motion?
Let's see, I will move to approve the joint Title I, Title II, and Title III grant application for the school year 2023-2024.
I will second. This is Danielle.
Thank you. Can I have a roll call, please?
Emila Aragon,
I'm going to vote yes, but I want to make sure it's with the promise that I will get the answers to my questions.
Danielle Gonzalez,
Yes.
Barbara Peterson,
Yes.
Tapia Romero,
Yes.
Josefina Dominguez,
Yes.
Courtney Jackson,
Yes.
Yolanda Montoya Cordova.
Yes. Our next item, we're moving on to special issues. And this is consideration for acceptance of the resolution and proclamation calling for a regular school district election on November 7th, 2023. Elect school board members and vote on the public school capital improvement tax. First, I'll ask, is there a motion? We can go into discussion if we have.
I will move for approval of special issues 6A, consideration for acceptance of the resolution and proclamation calling for a regular school district election on November 7th, 2023. Elect school board members and vote on the public school capital improvements tax.
Thank you.
This is Crystal. I'll second it.
Okay, so we have motion from Gonzalez and second from Tapia Romero. Is there any discussion? Any question?
I've got a question.
Go ahead.
As I look at the statute, I seem to be getting conflicting answers. And so I would like some clarification of what in the statute. From looking at it and talking with a couple of people, it seems like in our proclamation, we can ask for instant runoffs. That right now the city councils and local governments can have runoffs that are not instant, but there is statutory language that includes instant runoff. And right now, by having multiple candidates in any given race, we can end up with someone with far less than a majority being elected to the board if the vote is split. An inexpensive and straightforward way of addressing that is by having instant runoff. And so I'm curious about what is it in statute that prohibits our ability to include that. And sorry for background noise. I'm outside at my daughter's house, so there's noise that I can't control.
Oh, okay. Thank you, Mr. Melendres, for being here. You have the floor.
President Montoya Cordova, board members, and Barbara Peterson, board member Peterson. The statute in question gives municipalities the opportunity to have their instant runoff. The statute does not include school districts, and we have double checked that. So school districts are not eligible to have a runoff. The statute would have to be amended to provide for that provision. That is strictly related to municipalities, and that is defined in the statute.
I think it's something that we should look at statutorily then. I think it would make for just a more democratic body if all members were elected with the majority, not a plurality. And it would be a more straightforward process.
Thank you, Board Member Peterson, and thank you, Mr. Melendez, for being here to respond to that. Is there any other questions on the resolution? Go ahead.
Actually, I had an opening statement I was supposed
Oh,
to read.
oh,
Yeah, I'm sorry.
okay.
Just in case the general public wonders what we're talking about, they have it on tape. So as I'm sure you're aware now, because we're asking questions already, there is a school board election on November 7th for districts 1, 2, and 4. Sadly, 2 of our board members, President Montoya Cordova and Board Member Peterson, are not seeking re-election. You will be missed. Board Member Mula Aragon is running for a 3rd term, and good luck. Candidates will run and voters will vote within the boundaries of the new school board districts approved through the redistricting process last fall. The district maps are posted on the APS website along with additional information on the school board election. And a reminder, folks interested in running for the school board must declare candidacy on Tuesday, August 29th at the Bernalillo County Clerk's office. In addition to choosing 3 board members, voters will be asked to reauthorize the existing 2 mil capital improvement tax, which helps pay for such things as maintenance, security, operations, technology, and musical instruments. Approval of the SB 9 tax would provide capital revenue for the district through 2030. And I do have Dr. Blakey and Mr. Wajenje to answer questions on the capital improvement tax. So thank you for attending tonight. Thank you for your patience.
Thank you for your statement about that. Is there any, are there any questions? Go ahead. Board Member
Questions.
Jackson.
And this was this came in from a constituent that I thought was a good statement. So I'm actually just going to read it if you don't mind, but there are some questions in there that I think bear needing to be answered. And this is in regards to the capital improvement tax. So, okay, the voters just approved approximately 230 million of capital funding in the fall of 2021 and additional funding with the mill levy in fall 2020. The enrollment at APS has been declining significantly every year for more than the past 10 years. I believe there needs to be a moratorium on any additional property tax requests until a thorough audit of all school improvement needs can be reevaluated and reprioritized based on the current enrollment decline. So basically, I think that like the question based on, falling enrollment, our current capital funding, why are we asking for 2%? Why are we continuing to ask for the 2% or 2 mil? And I'm sorry, I didn't send this in sooner. I just got it, but I thought it was a good question.
Board President Montoya Cordova, members of the board, Board Member Jackson. The request is actually to fund what we use the funds for to keep as many operational funds to the classroom. So these funds pay for basically all of our maintenance and operations, all musical instruments, technology, and if we even if we downsize as we're working on in the right size committee, we still have current property that we would have to maintain and make sure that we're living up to providing adequate learning spaces for our children. So we wouldn't be in a situation where we would be closing all of our schools. And if we didn't continue the tax, we wouldn't have any funds. So we would be operating with $0 for any maintenance and operations or improvements on our current facilities.
What's our current unmet need in terms of, I know we have like a lot of unmet repairs, pieces that we need to do, right? So, I mean, I'm thinking, obviously, agree with the footprint, we've got a lot of schools, but even so, I'm just thinking in my district alone, the unmet need of just restoring classrooms so that they could be places where our kids want to go and parents want to be seen. It's like, but what's the unmet need?
Board President Yolanda Montoya Cordova, members of the board, the unmet need for the district is about $7 billion. Given we have, we've brought the average age of our buildings down from 70 years to about 49 years. But the unmet need to bring everything up to standard, including technology, is about $7 billion.
Thank you. And raising capital the way that we do is very typical of rural urban districts, correct? I mean, not rural, but urban districts.
Yes, and we do it at a rate of about $1 billion every 6 years, given without raising any tax rates, and working on initiatives like the board is working right now in terms of right sizing and mandates that come through.
And how does our mill rate compare to other urban districts our size in terms of what we're requesting when we go out to vote? Is it lower? Is it medium? Or where are we at in terms of the amount that we request?
So it depends on the tenure. So in some districts, the property taxes pay also for operations and salaries. But typically, if you go on a metric based on greater city schools, we are currently funded, I think, up to, something like 20% of our capacity. So basically, we're in the middle and lower in terms of the tax rates. We haven't raised our tax rate since 2006.
Thank you.
And just for clarification, this is what's going on the ballot is a request for the mill levy. It's not for the bonds, so it's not for capital projects. This is for just for maintenance.
For maintenance. Okay, I'm sorry.
SB 9.
Okay.
So I had one more question. So then with the right sizing, you said we currently have 7 billion in unmet needs. So with the right sizing, how much do you think that's going to save the district by a right sizing program initiative?
So in terms of the initiative of right sizing, depending on how far the board goes, and obviously it'll take a few years for it to come into fruition, we will cut the rate at which we have to spend in terms of bringing everybody up to equity. It won't necessarily reduce our obligations because it takes time. There's issues of inflation, and we shall be bringing an update report to the board, given that the longer we take in terms of our capital obligations, the price goes up because of inflation. Just between 2020 and now, price of maintenance and construction has almost doubled per square foot for various reasons. Some of it being inflation, some of it being COVID, some of it being supply chain issues. And so this way we just hold in terms of rate will not necessarily bring it down substantially unless we close down half the district. And even then, maybe we'll bring it down by maybe $1 billion. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Any other discussion?
Madam Chair. So then I know that there have been, I'm sure that you have kept track of this, but there are other districts that had special elections already. And there are, I heard a lot of them or many of them that their mill levy didn't pass. So they have another chance. Like if ours didn't, we still are okay until 2025. Is that correct? So we'd have a chance to redo it because these districts where it failed are going to have to do it, I guess, in November.
So Board Member Peggy Mueller-Aragon, I will let Mr. Melendres explain the legal, because there's some legal nuances in terms of our mill levy doesn't expire till 2025.
Right.
But because of state law, you have to pass the resolution right now. Otherwise, we shall have the authorization lapse and there'll be a gap. And I'll let Mr. Melendres do a little bit more of that explanation.
And so my concern, Counselor, would be what would happen to us if it would fail in November? that's a concern. So if you could just answer that, that's my concern.
Board President Yolanda Montoya Cordova, board members, and Board Member Aragon. If the citizens turn us down November 7th, the district, through the board making a decision, could ask the voters again in February of 2024 for an all mail-in ballot vote to impose or continue imposing the tax.
Okay, so we'd have to, I knew it was an all mail in, so do
It
you?
is a second opportunity, however, if it were to fail.
So it's a pretty quick, so November, we'd have to do it then, Mr. Melendez, by February.
Yes.
Okay, so do you know, I don't know if you've kept track of it, how many districts did their mail in? How many failed that did their mail in, their special election by mail? I mean, I've heard of, I think 4, but I don't know how many had one, I think. You don't
Sorry,
know.
I do not know the answer to that question. I only know of 2 districts that I worked on, and the citizens passed the all mail ballot in March of 2023.
Okay. It'd be good to kind of know what, I think a couple, I'm pretty sure it was Alamogordo, and I can't remember another one that they did speak up, to make sure that we try to learn from them, maybe what we need to make sure that we do that maybe they didn't do. And to the ones that did pass it, what did they do well? And there was some things that I heard that they did well, and then some other things that the ones that, where it failed in those communities that they wish they would have done. So I think that'd be good information to get to learn from them. And then I just always want to say is, I know people are always going, oh, we say it's not going to increase our property taxes, which it doesn't, so that everybody kind of understands when they see their property taxes go up, it doesn't have to do with this. It has to do with the fact that you have this mandated 3% assessed values that go up. And because of that, your property taxes do go up. So, but it doesn't have to do with this. And I just want everybody to hear that it's because the assessed values just always go up. So thank you.
Board Member Peterson, you had your hand up and took it down. Oh.
Just real quickly, I look forward to seeing the plan for communication for sharing this information with the community, because the mill levy in a lot of ways is easier to pass than the bond issues, even because it does go to very immediate things. Like every time someone complains about HVAC, we need to remind them about the mill levy and the importance of it, or musical instruments or software. So all of those things, I think we've done a really good job, and I'd like to commend Casito and his staff for really helping us communicate in the past. So I'll just look forward to it. We know anytime we've lost, it's in the long run simply increased our expenses. It's made everything more expensive when we have finally, attacked what needs to be done. So I look forward to the work of getting it passed.
Let's be successful. We definitely need to be successful on this one. Right. Go ahead, Board Member Dominguez.
What, if we have to go to a February mail-in, what does that cost us?
A lot.
At least $200,000 last time, just on the postage and the documents, as I recall. And then there's a push to try to get people to vote, and you don't want to go to a mail-in. It's not
expensive.
It's expensive, and it's very, very difficult.
Okay. And I mean, talk about it, not a great way to use our dollars. So let's get it passed. All right. Any other comments, questions? Hearing none, I'll ask for a roll call because I believe we had a motion and a second on this.
Peggy Mueller Aragon?
Yes.
Danielle Gonzalez?
Yes.
Barbara Peterson?
Yes.
Crystal Tapia Romero?
Yes.
Regina Dominguez?
Yes.
Courtney Jackson,
Yes.
Yolanda Montoya Cordova.
Yes. Okay, so we're moving on to our most important part of our agenda, student outcomes focused governance. So we're going to have a presentation of updated student outcomes focused interim goals and guardrails. This is just a discussion, and the superintendent has the floor on this. We did receive some information. It was at the dais just today, which makes me a little nervous because we haven't had enough time to review. So I just want to remind board members, let's use this time to listen to where where the updates are, what they're planning to do on interims. And then what I'm going to suggest is, because I just have a feeling, this is a board likes to process. So let's not process on the dais. I think what we could do is let's ask maybe, I might call on each person to ask like one or two very strategic questions. And if we don't get there, we don't have that, there's nothing wrong with us going ahead and writing some questions and sending those in, and we can get some information back, because I think that would be a better way for us to digest this. And plus, we can always put this back on the agenda once we've got some feedback and some questions, if there's still some questions to answer. But let's just listen for this tonight, and let's try to digest it that way. How do y'all feel about that? I think that's might be a better strategy for us, so it doesn't put us all we're not going to solve it all immediately, but we might have some questions that we could just send in. Is that fair?
I would say we would welcome that. And if you want to put a little stall on this, and we make the decision on this one, I understand, but we were not going to be able to present on June 21st. And we had promised to bring these by June. I have had available resources offered to me that we've been trying to follow up on. I've had some limited success, but recently some of those resources have become more available.
Spells on it. Spells on it.
And, if I can find the right angle.
But what?
This is where we are in a point in time today.
Okay.
And I think we've made real progress. We've made some adjustments based on things you guys requested. Some of the things didn't change. Some of the things didn't change because Mr. West and his team said, these are things we measure. These are things we can do. And there were some things that we looked at that we didn't think we could do. And so I can't put an interim in here. That's just something we can't do at this time. Doesn't mean we can't do it 2 years from now. It just means right now it's not something we do. So I don't think, as you look at this, as we go through the goals, I don't think much has changed in terms of the interim goals on goal 1 or 2. This pattern that you see, this pattern that you see kind of measured, it follows a pattern that most every other district that's doing this type of work is following. And it made sense to the SAPR team and the way they're looking at it. We'll look at the interim assessments that are being given. We're looking at it district wide. We know damn well there's going to be some changes across zones. And so we'll have to do some thought on that in terms of the monitoring that we show you. But these stayed pretty much solid. These are the tools we have. This is what we can use. And this is how we use it for the next 3 years as we go forward. That's really interims for goals 1 and 2. They're specific to the Yazzie Martinez subgroups and including the African Americans. And we're looking to populate that first set of data pretty quickly as we complete the school year. We're just waiting for the end of year data to fully populate so we can put something other than X in there, but it's coming shortly. So you may notice a trend here of a very different group of people here in the meeting. We are very light at the senior leadership this week, so I should have introduced him, but I know you all know him. But we have a number of executive directors that are serving roles in different ways, and I will tell you that Chris is extremely good at what he does. And I was on the ceiling yesterday, and he talked me off it. So as we finalized, made sure I was comfortable with the language. So looking at goal 3, I think one of the issues that we had last time we came was the concept of interim goal 3.1. the percentage of high school students who drop out of school will decrease. And the SAPR team feels pretty strongly that this is something that should be included. And, you know, if you look at the other ones, we're looking at graduates, right? So we're really only looking at 80% of our class. And SAPR is saying we need to also be looking at the other side of this so that we have a vibe on who we're missing and why we're losing them and how do we get them so that we can how can we increase these numbers if we don't look at these kids as well. And I don't know if you wanted to add to that or.
No, that's perfect.
Okay. Please mark that down. But that was the argument, because I said, we don't like that, we don't like that. And he said, no, here's why we like it. Here's what it does for us. Okay, so we're going to keep that. Looking overall at the percentage of high school students enrolled in these programs over 3 years, we're obviously trying to watch enrollments grow. One of the points that was made, I think Board Member Jackson was you, that as we look at zones, again, we're going to see differences. We're going to see in certain zones a higher number of AP courses. In other zones, we're going to see a higher number of bilingual SEALs, and we know we're pretty much nowhere on industry certification at this time. It's going to grow. So that's sort of the disaggregation that we'll be bringing forward, saying, okay, how are we going to work these resources to grow bilingual programs? And one of the concerns you've heard is a reason, and the reason we don't have a bilingual SEAL at every school is we don't have enough bilingual teachers, right? And so this is something we're trying to address, and we're looking at our recruitment efforts on how do we grow that workforce through the work we're doing with the university. We're trying to grow our own, but it's still limited. So, and then finally on that goal, I think, we look specifically at 11th graders because that's where we're going to see the most growth. They take in 10th grade, some of them will take AP World History. That's a class they can take, and a couple of the real advanced math kids, of course, will be in those courses. But really, it's not till 11th grade that we see the big burst of growth in AP. And that's when IB starts at Sandia, and bilingual SEAL really kicks up those last 2 years. So that 11th grade is a key grade. Then looking at goal 4, we are in process of finalizing the deal for Panorama. This year is a design year and trying to get it out, trying to roll it out and utilize it. We looked at the Washington, D.C. schools. They created a survey that pretty much mirrors this language. And so when I came to you before, we really had it focused on the middle grades. There was some concern about that. We've now moved to 5th, 8th, and 10th. The rationale being 5th and 8th are transition years. They're leaving schools. So they're going to have a very different perspective. And, you know, when you ask people are just getting there, it's rather difficult to say, you know, how comfortable they are. And the 10th graders, they've got enough high school, but they're not at the end. So if there is an issue, if there's really a problem in the high school, we thought that was the grade that might reflect it and give us the opportunity if there's interventions that need to occur, because they know it. One thing I know about sophomores is they think they know everything about high school, and they feel very, very comfortable in their own skin because they've been there, but there's still 2 years, right? There's still time to intervene should we need to. So those are the interim goals as they stand today. And if you want to ask a couple probing questions, Mr. West will answer them.
So these are just on the goals 1, 2, 3, and 4, because we also have guardrails and the interim guardrails for those. Are there any questions on the goals right now in terms of what you're seeing as a strategic question? Or go ahead, board member.
I don't know that it's super strategic, but my question is essentially, could you answer the questions that we were told to ask you by the Council of Great City Schools? So what is the degree of correlation between the interim metric and goal metric? I'm asking, like, could this be something that you can prepare as follow-up? There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 questions. Do you know what I'm talking about? It's in the...
Yeah, he doesn't, but I do.
Okay.
On page 6.
Pages 6 through 8 of the handout that they provided for us in January.
Yeah, we have those.
Okay.
I know that I would say that we have worked hard to try to align these things so that it does match what, one, the goal is asking, and two, that it measures as much of what the student performance is. I don't know that we've done the actual math to give you the 0.5 or the 0.23 or the 0.4 correlation at this time.
Yeah, so I'm just asking, like,
I know you were asked to ask, and
yeah, so when you send us the responses, can these be some of the questions that you respond to? And
you remember that you went through training.
Yeah, I did.
so sorry, I was just gonna say, we don't need the answers now, but go ahead if you want to.
So I actually am board president, Montoya Cordova, member Gonzalez. So actually I did get to go through the training as well. And we did walk through these types of scenarios when we were doing the training. And the guidance that we were given is to make sure that they were correlated, but not necessarily correlated as in a statistical measure, but as in, do the adults have the the ability to change behavior that will change the outcomes? And so, like, for instance, like with the high school graduate one, that's why we were strong about keeping in the idea of looking at the dropout rates, with the idea that we're looking at the numerator as well as the denominator, right? So if we want to have more students demonstrate these things, we want to have more students get to the end so that our denominator is growing. So the number of kids we are looking at in our schools, most of our kids that do have struggled, they tend to drop out after 9th grade year, and then some of them also drop out at 10th grade year. So if we had changed these interim goals, we felt the correlation would not be as strong because you would be missing out on a lot of those kids. It would be only looking at kind of more of a profile of a graduate as instead of a kind of a statement that matches up to the values of our community that we listen to. The same thing, of course, with with goal 1 and 2, since they're assessments that are measuring assessments, they are the correlations on those range anywhere between, the actual statistic is between 0.6 and a little bit above 0.8, with a 1 being perfect. So they're strongly correlated just because they're both measuring similar concepts. And then the goal 4 is the only one that's obviously, as we've been told by the Council of Great Cities, that's the only one that's hard because it's students reporting that they feel that they can do these things, or that they're confident that they have the ability to act in different situations, but it's not necessarily a demonstration. So that's goal 4 is the only one that has that kind of the question there about what the students can demonstrate, what they can do or cannot do. So I don't know if that helps a little bit more.
It does. Thank you.
Sure.
Any other questions? Or so what we'll do is just like
I can email.
just email all the other questions and maybe just connect it to the SOFG piece. But I mean, I think tonight is just an opportunity for us to start to wrap our heads around the interim goals. Board Member Jackson, did you have a question?
I
Or-
will. Did you?
Okay.
Nope. Nope. Okay. So I think my question, and you touched on it, Superintendent Elder, I think, and it actually was addressed kind of as we were leading up to this with like the Read 180 and even potentially as the new MRI and CSI schools, get introduced or get determined. And I think the question for me is, what about the others? What about, you mentioned about the zones. What about, how are we going to monitor? How are we going to make sure that the others that are not specifically addressed within these goals, how are we going to make sure that they are also being monitored?
Well, we align the guardrails and the goals to the goals. I mean, none of that data all that data is available. But in terms of what we're reporting on, we needed to report on what the goal read.
Right. So
when it says like goal 3, that's everybody.
Yeah.
4 is in everybody.
So I think what made me think about this was, earlier today we were discussing about Read 180, and we need data, and we need to, make sure that this is being evaluated. So it brought a question to mind: if Read 180, from what I understand, is a secondary program that we're using, it's not going to address 3rd grade. So
Oh, I see.
how is that going to be how are the kids that are not specific to this also going to be monitored so we make sure they don't fall behind?
Well, I think the reality is you all have asked us to focus on 4 goals. And you've asked us to align resources to those 4 goals. Okay, to meet these needs. To an extent, you are correct that there will be a lessening of our ability to support or to maintain, full observation on some of these other programs. However, it's sort of like, I would say, nowhere in your goal did you say we should feed kids. We're still going to feed kids, right? We're not going to stop teaching reading after 3rd grade. They will still be assessed. They will still be passing, and we will still look at those rates. I mean, we talked last time, and this is where actually Daniel, Board Member Gonzalez asked the question last time about correlation rates, because we wanted to do something with failure rates in Algebra 1 to see how that pertained to the increase in AP. And the question was, well, what does that tell us? And what's the correlation? And we kind of, it didn't seem to be real high. So we kind of dropped it, but we're still going to be doing research. He would love it if I could tell him, you only have to do this. But the federal government and the state government require much more data than that. All the special ed reporting continues, and all that data will still be available. And I think it will most likely have to be things that we bring into these discussions, because, for example, if I come in and say, wow, the Yazzie Martinez subgroups are doing really well, everything's gotten better, and they really improved, you say, oh, great. How did everybody else do? And I go, well, actually, they did really great too. And the gap's even larger. They jumped further ahead. You're going to have that comparative data. So I think it will be a component of the discussion. One of the things we're learning for example, on the monitoring calendar that we developed, it did not have all the information that council suggested. And I think, okay, we're adding some things to that. And I think what will happen is over time, as we do a couple of these, like in July, we're supposed to come forward and talk about college and career readiness. And that's kind of our practice run. My thought is that as this goes on over time, we'll get more sophisticated and we'll have a better sense of exactly what you're looking for. So I think the first run may be fairly stilted or limited because we just weren't 100% sure how to put it together. But then you'll say, well, look at these things, look at those things, and then we will, and you'll start to see it evolve into a more complex and potentially useful document.
Mm-hmm. Perfect. Yeah, it was a question that percolated up of, on paper, this is the only thing that you're technically, right, we're supposed to be monitoring, but through conversation, there's so many other things that need to be monitored. So we have to be aware of that.
The McKinney-Vento doesn't go away. They're not in the Yazzie Martinez, but we have to know how they're doing. The state reporting does not just say these little groups. I will say the lawsuit does say we have to focus on them. And this is, quite frankly, we are one of the few districts that has said we are going to focus on these groups publicly and put it in writing.
Put it in writing. I just have one more question, and I'm sure I can ask something else in the guardrail. Just a quick question, I think this is probably for you, Mr. West. So interim goal 3.3 is the percentage of grade 11 students who earned credit in at least one, but the goal is for 2. Is that because the 1 is an assumption that if they do 1, they'll do a second one in their senior year?
Board President Montoya Cordova and Board Member Jackson. Sorry, it's so nice seeing you in person. It's been a while.
Yeah.
Using your pictures on.
We're much friendlier when you can see us.
What I was going to say though, so if you think about the way that we're flowing this, so the idea the goal is to get more kids to graduate who are earning 2 or more courses, either an AP course or a combination of AP course, IB, or International Baccalaureate, dual credit course, or they're earning an industry certification or a bilingual seal. So what we're doing is we're first making sure that we're keeping them there so they can get to these classes. Mm-hmm. And then the second goal is we're making sure that it's our access to opportunities. Are they having what they need
to meet these things, which then nicely go into our guardrails where we do talk about resources. And then the third one is, okay, if we're giving them access to what they need, we're keeping them there, we're making sure they're engaged, we're making sure they make it to these classes, they're getting through their core courses. When they get to grade 11, we're seeing, okay, well, now that you've been there, are you starting to make progress towards this? And that's like exactly what you said, is that we're looking, our goal is for you to do 2 or more, but so do you have 1 right now? So the idea there is we're trying to kind of progress monitor them through, so that when they're getting to the 11th and 12th grade year, they're starting to think about what's next. And so that's why we did have the 1 in there, is our kind of our way of our check-in, or to see, are they going to then get a second one during that 12th grade year? Because we don't see them doing that in 11th grade year, then we know we have a problem in terms of reaching the 12th grade target. So you're right, that's the logic that we're following.
Okay, thank you.
And won't it be great that if that progress monitoring report comes in and they're showing us this, and we actually have a percentage of the 11th graders that are actually doing 2 or more by that point? I mean, that's a possibility. So I think, we're just setting at least that bench for at least the 1, but I think we're going to be able to see some flows in terms of how it's going to go, but I think also looking at it by zones and who's being impacted more, right? What students are more likely to do that versus those that are not. Then it's going to come back to the strategy around, if students in zone 2 are not, at that level, or they're lower, why? What is it? Is it access, but is it also readiness to go into to those courses? So I'm excited about just looking at the data, because one, we talk about it, but this is going to be able to, I think the progress monitoring, what I've noticed from other school districts, as I've watched them as they're going through progress monitoring, it's absolutely what the superintendent is saying. First ones are like, they're pretty rough, because everybody's trying to learn through that process. But it's by better questions from the board too, that it also prepares the next progress monitoring report. So everybody is in a continuous improvement loop, not just the district, but also the board.
Well, and I kind of thinking about it, every time we do data presentations like that, we include all groups. It's just do it. And I'm pretty sure the monitoring progress reports will require the same thing. So you're not going to just see this. It's just a natural way of things.
Yeah, and that's the way that during the training, like we'll always show you all the groups. And just so you know, like the APS dashboard, it all has all the groups. So that won't change at all. But the goal, like the superintendent say, because of your goals, we'll be making sure that we're really focusing on the student groups that you've identified. And then also, I will tell you the work that we're doing in Office of Accountability and Reporting, it's also going to that next level. So now that we have the grade 3 goal and the grade 8 goal, we're really starting to unpack with our colleagues at CNI the other parts. So it's just more than just, we want to make sure you get the full picture. So we're trying to go to the next level. So this is really helping us do that.
Mr. West, it sounds like it's very exciting. Yeah.
Any other questions on this, on the goals? That we can jump into the guardrails?
Can I just ask a couple of, just to make sure I heard you correctly? So the data on all groups is still going to be available and reported on. It just won't be monitored. Like it won't be part of our monitoring calendar. Is that correct?
It'll be on the, so we come and we're going to give you a monitoring report. It'll be on the monitoring report.
Okay. And then I think I wrote this down wrong. I thought that I heard somebody say that this could lessen our ability to monitor certain programs. Is that, I wrote it wrong?
No, I think it's correct. And I don't know about monitor, what I mean is, if you are directing the district to focus on 4 goals and you want us to see, things happen, it means we're going to have to everybody talks about all this extra money that's coming. And I showed you at the $100 million more, we have almost nothing to play with because it's all spent already, right? Salaries, materials, utilities, ate it up. So we're going to have to take what resources we have and refocus them. So that may mean that some programs are going to, and you keep saying, well, what about this? What if this program doesn't prove to be effective? maybe that program needs to go by the wayside. And then that funding then moves into the goals. So somebody's gonna be unhappy. Wait a minute, I've got this great person who does this. It saved my child, you know? Okay, but overall it didn't. So when I say it's gonna lessen, what I mean is we may have to reduce our focus on certain programs so that we can take those resources and apply them to these selected goals. That's how it works, because they're not going to give me more money and say, here's your money for your goals.
Okay. And then this is just a everybody knows what I already think about the goals, and it should include every single child. And you're kind of telling me we're still going to be reporting on them. So that's not going to go away. So that's a good thing, though I don't think it should be racist at all. The thing that I hope that you're going to be watching is, let's say you have a group that is not included here on goal 1 or goal 2, and you see that subgroup is, you know, their proficiency rates are starting to decrease. We don't think that'll happen, but if it does happen, what do you think? What kind of, I mean, would you have to pivot? What would you do there, Scott?
Well, we'll be talking to you in these monitoring progress meetings, and we'll be showing that to you and saying, look, this is happening. What do you think? I mean, our idea is we could do this, but this is your opportunity to provide feedback and thought. I don't really believe that certain groups are going to suffer under this. I really don't. There are inherent advantages that certain subgroups have that are not going to go away. And
which means that group they're going to have those still advantages that you call, that means a gap could then grow because they're still going to have the advantages.
That's what I'm saying. That's why we kind of have to show you everybody, because if I say, hey, these guys have grown, but this other group's grown more, and we don't know why, we're going to have to figure that out. And if other groups started to slip, it would certainly be cause for concern and some reaction. But we don't see that traditionally. That would be unusual.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, great. Any other comments? Let's move on to the guardrails.
Okay. So these are the really, really, really hard ones. These are the ones that I've been calling people around the country and asking for some support. I will continue to talk to these people, and there may be times we come forward and say more modification, and you guys are going to have apparently some time to send feedback, but there are changes. So looking at guardrail 1, the number of school and or community-based wraparound supports, we're going to try to increase those. We'll get our X number in there, and then we'll try to figure out what Y will be. You know, the percentage of students have access to SEL programming, and I kind of wonder about this one, if maybe we didn't put this correctly. I almost wonder if it should be a consistent SEL program instead of just SEL programming, because we've got SEL programming all across the district. But what has happened is it's in pockets. So Avid does some of it. I think this afternoon someone mentioned JAG is a space where they're teaching SEL. I know a lot of the programs in the elementary schools focus. I had a very wonderful special ed teacher at a small elementary school send me a book that her children had created, and it was all around the exact language that you guys have in the goal. I mean, and they were writing about why they were gritty, and they were writing about why that they understood self-awareness and standing up for themselves, and they had great stories. And it was hard because they're, I think, probably 3rd grade special needs, but it was a really interesting thing. And so there's people out there that have worked this into their curriculum. I think what we're really looking at is this more consistent program. So now that we have Panorama, what is that going to do for us? Well, how are we going to work that consistently across the district? And then one last way, where we really were trying to make sure things were working. We have invested a lot of money into our attendance programs. Okay. And this one took a while to figure out, but we believe we can chart the average daily attendance rate of all our kids. It's a report he does already. We do it every day. But by September 30th, we'll have identified a group of students on attendance plan that we can break down by Yazzie Martinez subgroups, including African Americans. And then we can chart them and see if that intervention is actually proving worthwhile. And we'll see if their daily attendance rates improve. I got stuck on this one for a while because if you're a kid who gets called in, you have 15 absences by September 30th. And the interventions going in the rest of the year, you only have 5. Wow, you've really improved. Except the way I measured it is you had 20 absences, right? So it didn't work for a long time. But once we discovered that they're tracking attendance rate, we can get a sense of that. I think this will be a better measure of a program that is really trying to make sure that we are providing services that work for our kids. As far as the superintendent will now allow resources to be allocated inequitably, we are going to continue to look at the fully staffed tiered priority schools. You mentioned the MRIs, TSIs, really trying to focus on making sure they start the year with not 9 substitutes. How do we really try to get people in there? This guardrail 2 is the nod to the new budget process we're trying to follow. We struggled with how to exactly say it, but we know basically we're doing 0% of this now. And in 3 years, we hope to be at really 100% in 3 years. But we know, and we've got that in the strategic plan, exactly how that breaks down. And we can be reporting on that to you pretty regularly. So you'll know the progress that we're making as far as, getting that process in place. And then again, when we're talking about the resources and this thing from the finance office, they are concerned that there are oftentimes unspent, unrestricted and operational funds. And we're really going to be pushing on people to spend that money and not spend it just on paper. We've had this conversation and I'll tell you as a principal, you don't ever want to run out of paper and you don't ever want to run out of toilet paper. So principals sometimes do stash money till the very end and they buy that stuff because they want to get through the summer. They want to be prepped up for, next year, but we're really going to work with them on why that's a bad idea and making sure that money goes into services for kids. So that's a measurable. Number 3. So this one is the next 3 are really fairly difficult. Because to know that we're doing it requires us to go in and look. And so we sort of copied the model of the organizational diagnostic that Attuned did, because we're already doing a lot of classroom visits and we're going to reconform those visits to meet this. So are they using the instructional materials? Is there evidence that they're using instructional? We know that Attuned set it at 30%. So we started at 30%. So we're going to try to push that to 100% within 3 years. Some of that goes with the retraining. So it may not be a good jump this year because we've got people like, I can't use that stuff. I know the old stuff, I'm not familiar. That's where we'll continue to push on that training, but move that needle. The only way you can do it is go in and look. And it won't be 100% of the classrooms we look in. We will look in selected classrooms because that's how it happens. You go into 15 classes in a school and you've got 5 or 6 people looking, and if somebody sees it, there it is. Number 2 is really looking for presenting grade level standard work. That was a big concern. And how do I make sure we're getting the right side? We'll make sure it's aligned to the grade level standard. And that's a little harder, because not all the observers are experts on 2nd grade, mathematics standards. Is this a standard? And so we're going to be working with the staff on which standard is it? Show what you're teaching here. I will tell you that sometimes you can walk into a room and you go, oh, no, this is grade level because it's just obvious, but sometimes it's a little bleak and you may have to dig. I don't know, but we have the tools to figure it out. And then finally, one of the things we measure, we were in the observation already, is they check a box in the observation as far as use of differentiation techniques. And one of the higher ratings is innovating, that they're not only just doing differentiation, but they're doing it well. This is something we can track. It's something that we can look at. We don't have the original number here, but it is something we can look at. Doesn't identify anybody, probably won't break it down by school or anything like that, but we might do it internally just so we can help with our zone associates in the work they do with the schools. But we think it's an interesting box that we can look at. Getting into the non-exclusion of parent, legal guardian, student, and community voice. I really did think having the advisory group for the superintendent was useful. I think over the next couple of years, we can start to expand that. They're not interested in meeting all the time, but I think 4 times a year seems a reasonable amount to build to. And if that turns out to be too much, then maybe we talk about 3 times a year and we'll figure that out. If it's not enough, then we can talk about it. I do think continuing with many of the people that you recommended or new people, because some of those people didn't enjoy the experience or they really enjoyed the experience, but their lives have moved on. I see that that was valuable for me. I learned a lot from that group and they were very helpful. Interim guardrail 4, we have parents already filling out a survey. And one of the things is, are they involved? They have voice of engagement in school operations. So right now, about 7% of the kids say that school staff consider their opinion. We'd like to see that rise to at least 85. And the reason that's going to be a little tricky is, at the same token, if you look at guardrail 4, we're going to try to increase the number of parents who are taking the survey. Right now, it's about 20% of our population. So we're going to see if we can't build that up to about, and we're never going to get to 100%. People just, first off, depending on who you ask, I either communicate too much or I don't communicate enough. And I've had parents tell me, stop sending me stuff. I don't want to hear any more from you. And so it's tricky, but what'll naturally happen, I think, is you'll see more people say, I'm not considered. And so that number's, I think, going to drop when we increase the numbers of parents that are responding. And so trying to drive it up at the same time is going to be a unique challenge. Finally, in guardrail 5, so we're not implementing programs without staff voice, with high quality professional and essential materials. Now I can come and tell you, we did this and here's how we did it. I don't know how I write that as a guardrail. So we are talking, Mr. West feels he can design a survey that will help us. And we're going to focus on very specific groups. Percentage of staff who report receiving adequate professional development for new instructional programs. Okay, will increase from 0, and it's 0 because we're not asking now. It's not that they don't get it, but we'll try to get that up to 70%. The other one was the percentage of staff who report receiving adequate district communication regarding the strategic plan. So that people know where we are throughout the year and are aware of what the monitoring progress reports are saying. We're really working on how do we push this plan into our departments. The schools are listening. I get to speak to the schools pretty regularly. I have a very difficult time talking to the departments. So this is going to be a unique challenge, but it's got to happen. And then finally, we have instructional councils and we have them for a reason. And some of them they report really high outcomes. Some report we're not getting anything done. We're going to start surveying them and say, did you feel you had input on site-based decision? I hope people understand that doesn't mean that was always agreed with, right? I think that's where people struggle. I said this, but we didn't do it, right? Because the vote went the other way, right? But you did get to put input in. So that's what we're hoping will help us. And so those are the guardrails as of today.
Oh, God, I'm so cold. I can't even think right now. So, all right, I'm trying to warm up. Okay. Any comments?
Sal, Renette has a blanket on. Thank you.
So just in the spirit of what we had talked about earlier is like, I think we're going to have some questions. We could get those in and then we can get some responses back. Is there like a specific strategical question that anybody would like to ask right now on the interims, or do you want to just hold? We can process. I'm a processor. I have to think about it. Did we lose Barbara? Is she still? Barbara and Crystal, are you guys still? Oh, you're still there. Okay.
I'm still here. I am for processing.
Okay.
I could ramble, but it won't be helpful. So I would like to just come back.
Okay, great. And we can do that because I think it's fair for us to have some opportunity for us to think back, but thank you so much for presenting them tonight so that it kind of helps us to get our juices flowing as well. So, all right. Well, that was easy, I think. So I'm gonna,
Damn, if it was easy, was it easy?
was it? Yeah. right.
The process was incredibly time consuming and it was difficult, but I really appreciate, especially Board Member Gonzalez coming in and saying, look, here are some resources. Think about these people. And it helped. It got us further along. And we did get some coaching from Ashley yesterday, actually, that broke a log jam on at least 3 of these. So that was useful as well. So like I said, when you say you want time to think about it, I'm fine.
Okay.
I'm fine. Because it's hard. It's really, really hard to put the wording and then making sure it's work we can do. And that was why some of the stuff where I just want to say, what is it we can actually do? Instead of us trying to just keep creating things that don't exist or we hope will exist, or we think we can do, these are things that we can do.
Okay. Well, thank you. All right. So the next Board of Education meeting will be held on Wednesday, June 21st, 2023 at 5 p.m. in the John Milne Community Boardroom of the Allison Bruce King Educational Complex at 6400 Uptown Boulevard, or virtually at aps.edu. And the next special Board of Education meeting will be held on Thursday, June 22nd, 2023 at noon in the DeLeo Martin Community Room of the Allison Bruce King Educational Complex. Our next item is consideration for the Board of Education to convene an executive session as authorized by the Public Meetings Act, Section 10-15-1 H2, to discuss a personnel matter, the superintendent's contract. So do I have a motion?
I move to convene to executive session as authorized by Public Meetings Act, Section 10-15-1 H2, to discuss a personnel matter, the superintendent's contract.
I second.
Okay, so we had Board Member Jackson and Gonzalez. I always want to call you Dominguez too. Sometimes I get that. Gonzalez, may I have a roll call vote, please?
Peggy Mueller Aragon,
No.
Danielle Gonzalez,
Yes.
Barbara Peterson,
Yes.
Crystal Tapia Romero,
She's gone.
Josefina Dominguez,
Yes.
Courtney Jackson,
Yes.
Yolanda Montoya Cordova.
Yes. So I've asked the board if you need to take a quick break, we can we've been at the dais for a while, so we'll get the folks in the room and I'm gonna run. Hey, Mr. Ortiz, how are you doing? Look at you, you've got a little glow.
And, okay.
Ashley, I'll need you to leave, please. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. These are my